Welcome to the Sage Intacct product tour for healthcare organizations. I'm Bob Shago. I work in Sage Intacct product marketing. Today we're going to look at why Sage Intacct has made big differences in the financial health of growing companies. We're going to do this by diving into the product and looking at a few of the ways Sage Intacct brings visibility and productivity to the financial team. We aren't going to dive into every area of the product today, but rather stick to those areas that are of general interest to most healthcare companies. Today we're going to look at built-in dashboards and reporting, infrastructure that provides flexibility, and the automation tools that keep your team efficient and in control. We're also going to look at how Sage Intacct's best-in-class approach connects you to other best-in-class services. Before we dive into the system demo, I'd like to set the stage a little with why we're looking at these particular areas. As a growing healthcare company, you face challenges in finance. Many of these challenges can actually become a bottleneck to growth. Are you seeing a growing number of transactions in both revenue and expenses? Are those transactions occurring at more locations where information is slow to make its way back to the main office? Are you finding the close and subsequent visibility taking longer and longer? Are you relying on Excel spreadsheets to report on key information? Throwing more people at the problem has its own challenges and often leads to less control over financials. We should be celebrating growth, but often the finance team is stuck cleaning up a lot of messes created by growth. The reporting spreadsheets that worked so well when you were small become cumbersome and error-prone. Closing the books and using spreadsheets to get out end-of-period reports can take so many days or weeks that the reports are out of date as soon as they are complete. All of this leads to questionable decisions being made on old, questionable data. Your business has requirements and processes you need to follow. Manual workarounds and spreadsheets cost you time and accuracy. When every location or department is making purchases on their own, you lack the controls necessary to capitalize on the new scale of your growing company. No one is holding vendors accountable, picking the best vendors, or capturing the benefits of volume purchasing. And approvals, where they exist, become a manually intensive game of find the manager. Continued growth in a competitive environment requires a more nimble approach to finance. In today's demo, we're going to dive into examples of a more nimble approach, made possible through the power of cloud computing. An ideal solution would include reporting that is built in and configurable by the accounting team without the help of IT. It should capture real-time metrics that help the company see where they are going each day. An appropriate report should be available for review by any manager or stakeholder without having to request information from the finance team. From a single login, finance leaders should be able to see financials across all the locations or entities, both individually and consolidated. They should be able to see this consolidated view at any time, not just at the end of a reporting period. The system should be configurable by the accounting team to match their business requirements, and they should be able to reconfigure and align workflows, forms, and reports without the help from IT. In purchasing, automated workflows make the process completely transparent, and approvals are automated as part of every purchase. Because finance serves as a hub for other business applications the company needs, it should be able to integrate with other systems to eliminate double data entry or other manual processes that often result in delays or errors. Let's go ahead and get started by diving into our first area of the product, built-in dashboards and reporting. As we look at visibility and reporting, we'll start with built-in role-based dashboards and then look at how you dig deeper, as well as how you, as a finance professional, create unique reporting to exactly match the needs of your business. I'll show you how you can use dimensions to filter and regroup data into meaningful information. We'll also look at how you combine financial and operational information to gain strategic insight into the business. As we start the demonstration today, I'd like to point out a few things about the interface so you can understand where I'm going and how I'm navigating through things. First of all, I'm logged into this company as myself, Bob Shago, and you can see I have all the applications or modules here that I'm going to need. I'm a super user, so I have access to all the modules and I have access to all the entities. So you'll notice from this little drop-down menu here, I have a company that has 4 entities, 10, 20, 30, and 40. For the different cities where these offices are located. I'm also logged in on another tab as a different user. This is Drew Jackson, and you can see that he's an employee. He's looking at the employee dashboard. And Drew only has access to 2 of the entities. And you'll notice on the applications bar that he has fewer applications available to him. And the only place he can really do anything are in purchasing and time and expenses. And we'll come back to this a little bit later when we get to the purchasing demo. I just wanted to point this out. Going back to my original tab here, you'll notice I'm on a dashboard. And as we start looking at this dashboard, there's a few things we can see here. One is we can see that we can create multiple dashboards. And so I have different dashboards for different roles within the company. Along each dashboard, I have what are called performance cards. And these are metrics that show up and they give us information about a current value of a group of accounts and whether those have been going up or down based on the period we choose. In this case, all these are set to prior month. You could also choose prior quarter, prior year, and you can look at these metrics on these larger reporting periods. You notice we have different dashboards for different roles. I've got a CMO dashboard I can look at. Here we've got the sales view for the CMO dashboard. And we can look at different things like not just the financial grouping, like assets or revenue, but we can also look at financial plus statistical groupings. So a calculation of something like revenue per bed in this case. And we can see that value. As we look at any of these financial listings, we can drill down into those. And so notice here, if I click on this value, I can drill down and I can see information inside the expenses area. And I see this report. I can further drill down and look at transactions behind these. So I can go and I can see that there was a general ledger report that contained all this information. And I can see that there was a journal entry in the AP journal. And I can see what locations those were against. And I can even drill down to that journal entry itself. And I can see the actual journal entry transaction. And if I want to, I can look at an audit trail of that journal entry and see any changes that might have been made to that. But I want you to see that all of these things have the ability to drill down, and the same with any of the reports on the screen. So notice that I have several reports on the screen and charts. I have cash flow detail by entity on the administrator dashboard. I was looking at a lot more performance cards, and I was also looking at balance sheets and income statements. And I can drill down into these and find further information. If I see numbers that are out of place or seem to be anomalies, I can drill down and find out more about those pieces of information. I can also go into something like a role-specific dashboard, like a physician's dashboard. In this case, we come up with information that's specific to the physician. Notice that I have several charts that might be of interest in this role. I can also do mashups, which is I can look at an external website within a component on my dashboard. In this case, I've got a reference to the Merck manual, and I can go ahead and click through to that right here from the dashboard. I'm also looking at things across the organization. So notice here I'm at the top level. I'm looking at revenue per bed by location. If we go back to that CMO sales view, notice that I was looking at cash flow broken out by location. I can expand this to give me the full report. And I can look at more information about each of these. I could drill down into net income, and I can see the breakout of all the pieces of information around net income, or any of these. I can expand these different columns or different rows. I can also filter this. So let's say I don't want to look across all of these. I can bring up filters and I can choose location. And so in this case, I'm just going to choose New York. Click OK. Now I've broken this down to just New York, and I noticed that within New York, I have 2 locations. And so those are broken down, and it shows me that information. Also on our dashboard, we've got this same revenue per bed by location. And so I can see the revenue broken out by location. I can see the balance sheet broken out location. I can also see different kinds of charts, in this case a donut chart, and it really gives me a clear picture of which locations are really driving the net income for the organization. As I drill down, I can see that I have another item here. This is a chat system that's built into it's called Collaborate. It's a chat system built into the system, and it allows me to post comments here. I can also post through my own Intacct Collaborate feed. I can go directly to that and see all the information. And as we'll see as we go forward, I can put notes on different documents within the system, and they're permanently stored with the documents. In addition to dashboards that we have where we can look at different types of things in a dashboard, we also have the ability to look at reports. So I expanded this report here that was put on the dashboard. I can also go in and I can look at dozens of pre-built reports in my report center. So right now I'm looking at all my financial reports. I can sort this view to look at all applications, or I can look at them just for certain applications, maybe accounts payable. I can look at an AP ledger, recurring report, my 1099 reports, whatever I need to see within that application. So this way I can filter and get right to what I want. I can also create what we call favorites. And so I can shorten my menu up. Let's say I look at the balance sheet and I look at balance sheet percent of ownership. When I go over to favorites, I can see that I've got the balance sheet and the balance sheet percent of ownership there on my favorite reports. And so I can create a smaller set of reports here that I use on a regular basis. I can immediately go back to all reports where I can sort by this view. So if I look across all reports across all applications and scroll through that, you can see we have actually over 150 standard reports that are built into the system. I can also have these reports run on a schedule. So I'm going to go back to just my financial reports here, shorten my list up a little bit. And I have actions I can set against these reports. And so I can say process and store, meaning I'm going to store the version of this report right now as it is. So I'm going to run it for today and store that report. I can view an audit trail. Who's changed this report? What's changed about it? I can also schedule this report. And that's really important because I can take that schedule and I can set this report to run, say, month end. And I can also have it delivered. I can create a list of emails that this report gets delivered to in PDF format or in Excel format, however I want to run that. And we'll go ahead and send that out. And so I can create this reporting package and send that out on a regular schedule. The other thing I can do is I can take any of these reports and I can edit them. I mentioned the exporting. We generally look at them in HTML within the system. Keeps the drill down available for us, but we can also have a PDF, CSV, or an Excel file exported. So we can look at this in these different formats for delivery. When I click edit, it takes me to my financial report writer. Now let's say I like the balance sheet, but I want to change some things about the balance sheet report. But I want to save this balance sheet report. What I can do is I can go ahead and duplicate the balance sheet report. And just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and call it My Balance Sheet. And I think I already created that one somewhere. I'm just going to call it My Balance Sheet 2 just to make sure I don't overwrite something. And now when I come back in here, I can see My Balance Sheet 2. I'm going to go ahead and open that. I don't need to sort it. I'm going to say OK. That's how I would view the report. There's a few things I want to change about, so I'm going to go to My Balance Sheet 2. I'm going to click Edit. I'm going to go to Columns. And now here in Columns, I can go ahead and change a few things. I could have changed a few things in rows. These are the actual accounts I'm looking at and the account groups I'm looking at. And in Columns, I can edit these individual columns of the report. In this one, I'm looking at current month, and I want to go ahead and it says do not expand right now. I want to go ahead and expand this by locations. So I'm going to tell this to expand by locations, and it says show one level down with roll up. Okay, so just one level down, save that. And now when I save this report, we looked at what the report looked like a minute ago. Let's just go ahead to preview this report. in the HTML version. Now you'll see that I didn't create multiple columns. All I did was expand the column by locations, by a dimension. So this is an example of expanding a report by any dimension. I could have expanded it by another dimension. Perhaps I have a report by customers. If you don't have a lot of customers, that might be a great report. If you have a lot of customers, that could be pretty extensive. Maybe you have different product lines and you want to extend by the items in your products line. Or maybe you've used item as something else. As we'll see later, we can reassign dimensions. So this is the idea of dimensions. Entities are dimensions, items are dimensions, customers, vendors, employees, and you can even define your own dimensions, as we'll look at. And so we can duplicate a report, and then we go through this sort of online style cookbook, I like to think of it. And we go through and we can change the rows. We can select account groups to be added to this structure, and we can create computations, meaning that we can create a column that contains a computation where we take and we run calculations against these different assets. So we create a column that is just a computation column. Maybe it's a total, maybe there's some kind of breakout going on, like revenue per beds, or we run the balance sheet per customer. And then we can filter this. And this is an area that gets used a lot. We can create filters that get prompted at the time the report is run just by clicking prompt, or we can go ahead and set a filter. So we could go ahead and set this filter to run, all the time for a specific department, and then we can select that department. And this will be saved with this report, and we can undo the prompt, and this will be statically filtered with the report all the time. And so there's a lot we can do with filtering, and I can set multiple filters. I could set it by a department and a location. And then we have formatting that we can do, so we can change the look of the report. Maybe you have a particular look for your reporting to the board or to a group of stakeholders in the company, and you want to make this look like your brand, like your company. And then permissions. So this is really important. I can set permissions around this report so that not everyone has access to every report. Some reports may contain very sensitive information, and I don't want this to be able to show up in anybody's dashboard or anybody to be able to look at this report. I can go ahead and set report owners, and I can set myself as a report owner for this. So now I have control of it. It always comes up that I have ownership for making changes to it. Let's first add a user. I'm going to add myself to this report so I can see it. And maybe I want to remove this user group. And I've moved group everyone has to either be available or excluded. So I'm excluding everyone. I'm allowing myself to see this report. And then I could add more people to this report as needed. And so I could have a limited access to this report. So we create permissions about what people can see within the system. And a little bit later, we'll get into permissions within the infrastructure about getting to the different transactions, getting to different modules within the system. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the report writer now. And that's just a little bit about our standard reports. We also have custom reports, which you see listed here. And with custom reports, you can go ahead and create a report. It walks you through a wizard. So you've got multiple steps walking through a wizard to create a configurable report without programming. So this isn't like some systems where you need some expert to come in and program your report to be able to look at different groups. But what we do is we create it. I'll just go ahead and show you. We can create a report. Like for instance, let's go ahead and edit this cost center expense report. So I'm looking at the purchase order transaction detail. I've selected that, and I've chosen from the list of different types of transactions I have under purchasing the vendor invoice, and I'm looking at the vendor invoice detail specifically. So I'll just click next. And so what it's doing, it's looking at the line items from my purchase orders, and so I can select different fields from that, which will create columns in my report, different fields from the transaction. And I can go to related items. So the header for this purchase order, I can go ahead and select the due date and the document ID and the total paid. And from here I can drill down even further and I can look at more and more information. I could look at the vendor, and then from the vendor I could actually bring in information about the pay to contact if I needed to. And so I can select these different fields to become columns in my report. So I have this extended report that I get to create just by configuring. So you don't have to go out and get a programmer to create scripts to create these reports. And I move through this series of things like adding calculated columns, setting the column sequence, setting totals, setting column sort order, filters, grouping data, setting the order of the groups, until we get down to save and add. So I go through all these steps, but it's all configurable wizard menus like this. And so you can create any number of these reports, and then I can go ahead and assign them to different modules by adding it to a menu. So in this case, I'm going to add this to my purchase orders menu. That means when I'm in purchasing, it'll show up under my reports here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So my cost center expense report isn't just under custom reports now. When I'm working in the purchasing module, there we go. Under report, custom reports, I have the cost center expense menu. Sometimes when you first create something, you might need to refresh the menu system. I'm going to go back to my dashboards here. And because this is really a starting point within the company and within visibility. And so the whole point here is that I have visibility into my organization and have the ability to look at my organization from different roles and the ability to really get to the information immediately that I need. And I can bring this up in a board meeting. I can bring this up in strategic planning meetings and get right to the information I need, drilling down into the transactions themselves to really see what's relevant. I have a question that's come in. The question is, can budgets be formula driven? So I didn't really talk about budgets here a lot, but I could have created a cash detail against budget, or balance sheet against budget, or expenses against budget in here. And budgets can be formula driven in that they can be created in Excel and imported in. So you can use Excel to generate your budgets and then bring them in. They can also be exported out to do what we call what-if analysis. And a lot of Intacct partners have automated solutions for that type of budgeting. Another way they may be formula driven is that if you simply want your budgets to roll forward, say 3% from one period to another, you can set that and have it run across all your budget items. But if you want something more complex than that, there's partner solutions that do that. Another question, can a P&L budget be updated each month with a new forecast for the remainder of the year? That would have to be done through one of our partners. And when I get into the later part of this demonstration where we're going to talk about integration, you'll see that we have a lot of partners that have already created solutions for this. You can manually update in Intacct, but to be automated, you need to look to a partner for that. And with that, I'm going to end the visibility portion and move back to our presentation. One big reason for a configurable infrastructure is having the tools to grow the system as the company grows, and being able to do that without constant requests from some other department. So moving into our infrastructure demonstration, a lot of times you have many users, right? You have different types of users with different permissions to different applications, and you want functionality within those applications limited to just the role of the user. And so the way we do that is we go ahead and set up users within the system under the company menu. So I'm going to go over there. So let's say I want to create a user. I would go under, I could manage my users. So I could go right over here and I could go to users, and I'm going to create a new user with this plus symbol on this left slide out menu. And within this user, I put some basic information about the user. I give them an ID that they'll use to log in, set their email address. These are important things. Everyone has to have a unique email address, a contact name. So that's related to their contact information, which might have phone numbers and address and different things we'd want to know about the user. And I set the user type. The business user is the full user. This is what you need to be to actually do accounting within the system, to be able to use accounts receivable and accounts payable and purchasing and order entry and different things like that. In the general ledger, you need to be a business user. But we also have other user types, which are less expensive users, like employee. And the employee user has a limited scope as to what they can do, but not what they can see. So you could actually let an employee user see all the customers, but not actually create or edit customer details. But you can let an employee user create purchase requisitions and do time and expenses. So those are the main things that an employee user would do. A project manager is if you're running the projects module, the project manager has more functionality within the project system. A platform user, if you're using your own application, so you can extend the Intacct system by creating platform applications, and platform users can use those applications without being a full business user and using all the standard accounting applications. CRM user is used to create users within the system that are actually users over in Salesforce, in your Salesforce CRM, and it allows them to interact with the integration that we have with Salesforce. We can give a user limited or full admin privileges. The main difference between those is that a full admin can create another admin, but a limited admin cannot. And then we have different statuses. So we could, rather than deleting a user, you would deactivate a user. If someone leaves the company, you would deactivate them. That way they'd still be available for all your past audit reports and audit trails and things. And then we have some rules around passwords and things. We also have their role information. This is really important because, as I'm going to show you, we deal with setting up users rather than setting up users with individual permissions, which you could do. You can just set up, you can ignore roles and set up users with individual permissions. You can set up roles for users. And that way you can set up all the permissions necessary for that role. And when another user comes on that's in a similar position, you can just assign that role to that person. Or you might assign multiple roles to a person. You can limit the entities that the user is allowed to use. Remember, I mentioned Drew Jackson that I'm logged in as. He's limited to just 2 of the 4 entities that we have in this organization. You can also set departments and territories for users, so they would report to a department manager. Jumping over to roles, I'm going to go ahead and leave here. This is a list of roles within this company or organization. If I look at AP Clerk here, I can see the subscriptions available to AP Clerk. These little check boxes mean that something is turned on within this application. So by seeing that I have a lot of empty check boxes, it means that this user doesn't have any permissions inside these other applications at this time. The only permissions for this user are in accounts payable, and I can click permissions to see what those are. So this is a full set of permissions for the accounts payable module for this user. And this user has the ability to list, add, edit, and delete vendors. They can see vendor groups and bills. They can deal with AP terms. And perhaps I want them to also be able to see summary, so I can create list and view for summary, but I don't want them to add, edit, or delete those. So you can really decide specifically what you want the user to do with each of these items. I can also limit the number of reports this user can see. They can run the AP ledger report. And maybe I've decided I want them to deal with aging, so I'm going to turn on the vendor aging reports and graphs so they can see that as well. Now, if I had a super user, I could go up in this corner and just click all. So I don't have to sit there clicking all these buttons. Or maybe I have an employee user that I want to be able to see everything within accounts payable. I could just click read only and it would change this. And if I wanted to clear the permissions, I could click none. So we have some shortcuts to make this easy to configure so you're not clicking a lot of buttons for every role that you set up. But once this role is set up, I can continue to use this role and assign it to different users. And I'm currently assigned to the subscriptions role, and you can see that that has access to the administrator subscription. And you can see that the administrator role has access to all the modules. And if we went in these permission menus, you would see that everything is checked. One thing that's limited for someone with limited access, as we saw when I jumped over to this tab for Drew Jackson, is that Drew doesn't even see the modules that he's not allowed to see. So it's not like he's going into a lot of areas and just seeing gray areas or things that are closed to him. We've just removed them from the interface so that it's not cluttered up with things they don't need to see. You also have the ability to set up as many entities as you need. So moving back over to the company menu, we have entities here. And here's my 4 entities. So these are legal structures. There's locations within those entities, but those locations aren't entities themselves. Those are just different locations. I can set them up as individual legal entities if I want. The great thing about entities is that I can create inter-entity relationships between them. So as I create an entity or edit, and I'll go ahead and edit this first entity, you can see that I have an inter-entity setup, meaning I have a relationship and accounts for that relationship for receivables and payables between these different entities. And so I can account for bills within the entity. Let's say company 10 receives an invoice and they decide to have another company pay it for them. I can do that from the top level here. And then I can let Sage Intacct use the inter-entity relationship to make the journal entries automatically. So I'm not doing a bunch of inter-entity journal entries like you might be doing. So if you're running off of something like QuickBooks right now, where you've got every entity running under a different file, at the end of period, you've got to do a lot of journal entries to handle all the inter-entity transactions, who paid for what. The due to and due from reporting is based on those journal entries, and it's posted in a separate inter-entity journal. So this is going to make it easy to segregate those and reconcile at the end of the month. So as I mentioned, we have locations in addition to entities. So within this entity, I would have other locations, and we would set those locations up under that particular company. So if I jump over here to the San Francisco entity, just by clicking from this drop down, notice I get a new tab. So my top level tab is still available, but now I'm working directly in the San Francisco company or entity. And if I go to that company menu, I have locations within that, and I have 2 locations inside of that. And I can set up as many locations as I need. But they're running under one company, this San Francisco company. So you can kind of create this hierarchy, this parent-child relationship here. One way we help keep track of things. Also, I mentioned dimensions earlier. We have standard dimensions within a company. If I jump over to the general ledger, let's go ahead and close San Francisco for the moment. We'll go back to the top level. I'm going to go to the general ledger. And yes, I want to leave this menu. You noticed I wasn't finished editing that menu, so a little warning comes up so I don't lose what I'm working on. If I go over here to the general ledger, you'll notice I have a dimension structure with departments, employees, item, location, municipality, and here's one called patient. Now, patient isn't a custom dimension. What I've done in this case, because this is a healthcare company, I've changed the terminology within the company. And the way I did that was I went over to company. So here I am on the company menu, and I scroll down to this, right down under this setup area to this line terminology. When I go to terminology, it lists all my different available dimensions. So these are the standard names for these dimensions. Notice that class is the dimension that the system knows, the original name. I've changed the name to product line and product lines. And here customer, this is the one I just pointed out, has been changed to patient and patients, so that my system now recognizes, rather than class, which is very generic, as product line, customer is patients. And then these other ones I've left pretty much alone. But I can change the names on these standard dimensions to make them fit my way of doing business, to fit the company that they're in. And it makes it easy to move from an old solution to a new solution and to retain a lot of terms that you had in another solution. If you're migrating into Sage Intacct, you can simply set the terminology to match what you were doing before. The other thing we have within the infrastructure here that makes this so nice and allows us to do this top-level dashboard, notice these are all, as I mentioned, roll-ups from across all these different locations, is that we have a shared chart of accounts. And what I mean by that is that I set the chart of accounts at the top level. And when I go into the general ledger and I go to my GL accounts, I've set this same chart of accounts at the top level with the, and notice they're natural numbers. I don't have a lot of extensions with the exception of these due to and due from entities regarding my inter-entity relationships. The system set these up, these dot 1, 2, 3, and 4. Other than that, we don't have any extensions on these. That's because dimension is handling the function. So in another company, I might have, a different account for each, maybe have an equipment account, 1500, and I have a different account for each, maybe a dash or a dot and an extension for each location. And then an extension beyond that for each department. I might have 3 or 4 extensions to this account number. And then I'm tripling and quadrupling my number of accounts in my chart of accounts. We've been able to simplify that with dimensions so that you have a smaller set of chart of accounts with natural numbers. And because this whole chart of accounts is shared and the rules are defined at the top level across the accounts, we can go ahead and establish any change that happens within any of the accounts is automatically rolled up to the top level. So if I'm over in the New York City entity in this company and I do business and I, create some transactions under accounts receivable and I receive a payment, that automatically gets rolled up and will show up on the dashboard in the assets as money received in my top level. We also share customers and vendors, or in this case, patients and vendors, across all the entities. And then we can also create restrictions on those to certain entities. So perhaps I want to create a top level list of patients, but I want to restrict them to certain entities. I can do that by looking at my patients. I can set this patient with restrictions to locations. And so I can go ahead and select this and I can choose which locations this patient happens to be restricted to, just the Atlanta location. Then I'm done with that. And so I can go ahead and say, okay, this patient is available at the top level, so I can look at all the financials around this patient, but we can only do business at the Atlanta location because that's where this patient happens to reside. We can also do the same with vendors. This way we're looking at vendors from the top level. We can see where we're using vendors across multiple companies, and maybe we want to take advantage of bulk discounts. Rather than having a purchasing agent at each location, we start purchasing as a company and start getting better rates. We can keep track of purchases that come in and really track those at our main financial office. I have a question that's come in. It says, can you allow someone from a remote location, not part of the finance team, to add a purchase order? Sure. There could be a user with limited permissions, and then in the access log, you can track all the things that the user's done in the system. So everything that someone does is logged. With that, I hope I've shown you some of the infrastructure pieces and some of the configuration that you can do. So you're not going to need to go to IT to get things scripted to configure things to match the way you want to do business. You can do that right inside the system, giving finance the control of running the financials according to the policies and the processes of your business. As you might expect, purchasing follows similar workflows to those in order entry or inventory management. It also has some unique aspects to help you maintain spending control across your organization. Okay, so in our automation demo, we're going to go over to purchasing. So I go to the main module, or the main menu for all my modules here, and I click purchasing. And I'm going to go down to this map here. First of all, let me show you a little bit about this purchasing map. So we've glanced at this in a couple of applications so far. But what we've got here is, this is the application map or the overview for the application for purchasing. And we still have this slide out on the left. It can get us to anything that we need. We can create favorites, again, of anything here. So I can go ahead and maybe I do a lot of purchase orders. I can create that as a favorite. And now when I click favorites, it shows up. So I can create a shorter list under favorites, or I can go to all on this slide out menu. I can also go to this main map here, click any of these. I can get to a list of vendors, warehouses, product lines, items, or price lists. And the main area we're going to work in is tasks. Notice I have create purchase requisition. And as I roll over that, there's a little triangle here. It gives me two different purchase requisition documents that I've created. Because you can define your own transaction documents, you can have multiple transaction documents under any one of these categories. So a requisition doesn't actually hit the general ledger, right? It's just going to be a request for a purchase. And then a purchase order is a statement that we've made the decision to purchase this thing. And then we'll receive a shipment, and then we'll create a vendor invoice, which then flows over to the general ledger into accounts payable and really works into our financials. We also have the ability to approve purchasing transactions here. If we needed to, if we had transactions that this applied to, we could split and merge transactions. This would be if we had multiple transactions to the same vendor, or we have line items we need to split off, something with multiple line items, this would be available. And this is where we would print an email and maybe return a shipment. And then we can look at our reports in this lower section. This is also all available on the side here. When we click any one of these, we are choosing to create a new record of that type. If we just want to see the list of records, we would go over to the list here and click the name of the list rather than the plus symbol to see the list of those records. I'm going to start this off by actually moving over to Drew Jackson's login. Remember, he's an employee and he has the ability to create a purchase requisition. Notice these other things, purchase order, receivers, and invoices are all grayed out for Drew. He doesn't work with those. What he works with is purchasing requisitions. So we'll go ahead and click purchasing requisition to create a new purchasing requisition. And Drew's going to go ahead and he's going to requisition some medical supplies. So we're going to go down here to our medical supply, USA, and we are going to choose some items here. Let's go ahead and get some of these heart monitor leads. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to get 10 of these. And so we've got this invoice, this purchase requisition here now for $43.50. I could go ahead and create attachments. Maybe I have a picture of that item I could put in here, or I have a quote from a vendor. They've already told me this is how much it costs. I'm going to go ahead and attach that PDF here as proof of that cost. And I'm going to go ahead and I could create a message here, you know, something about these items. If I had a document from the vendor, I might put that in here. If the vendor had given me that quote, I might put that quote number in here, so it would help track that with the vendor. Or if later on this number becomes important, if they bill me for something, when I receive it, I can add that document number in here to track their bill as well. Notice how when I chose the vendor, everything was automatically loaded in, my requested by and shipped to. And we'll go ahead and submit this. I didn't provide a location. You remember that we've got two locations that Drew could be working in. And in this case, we need to know where this thing's going to. And so we've made, on this transaction document, we've said that location is required. It's a good time for me to show that each line item has additional fields underneath it in this drop down. I can go ahead and edit this line item and move these fields in line. So I might want to move location in line since I've got it required, make it much easier to select during the process. I can also select any of these other dimensions. Maybe I assign this to a particular patient if I had some kind of a pass-through cost going on here, if I've ordered something directly for a patient. Perhaps I choose a product line or a particular employee. Notice this is user-defined dimension. We've given a generic name. I could name it anything I want, but I've created a user-defined dimension. I mean, you can create more than the standard dimensions. You can create as many as you need and have them within your company. And you can slice and dice and filter information by those dimensions that you've defined. In this case, we need to assign a location. And I'm going to go ahead and assign one of these locations. He's allowed to work. He works in San Francisco and New York. Well, he's busy. I'm going to choose New York as my location for this purchase requisition. I'm going to hide those details. So now I have this line item. And I'm going to click Submit. So now we're back to this main purchasing menu. If Drew had the ability to convert this requisition, it might take him to a list of those requisitions. But because he doesn't, it's just going to take him right back to this home purchasing page where he might put in another purchase requisition. I'm going to jump back over to my own login where I'm a business user. And in purchasing here, I have this purchasing approve purchasing transactions button. When I go in there, I see that here's this transaction that Drew just put in, purchase requisition 58 for medical supplies for $43.50. And I can approve that from here. At this point, I've also received an email that tells me this requisition is waiting. So I could click on that and it would take me to the system and I could approve it. I could also pull that up on a mobile device. So I could look at this on my phone or tablet and there's an approvals menu there where I can approve transactions remotely on my phone or tablet. And so we aren't playing chase down the manager anymore. I could also have an item on my dashboard that showed things waiting for approval. I could have a component that showed approvals, items waiting for my approval. And this could be transactions that I need to approve. Maybe I need to approve expense reports. Any of these kinds of things that I need to approve would show up on my phone or my tablet in my email box, letting me know what I need to do and keeping this process moving in an automated way. So we're not manually creating these approval lists and running around finding managers to get signatures. We're simply going through and approving these. So I'm going to go ahead and click approve on Drew's purchase requisition. And I could leave a comment at this time as I approve this. Now when I go over to purchase requisitions, I can see that this is here waiting. This is the same one, number 58. I can go ahead and convert this now to a purchase order. So when I click convert, I get this little drop down, this little menu that pops up next to convert. I'm going to choose purchase order. So now all the information from the original purchase requisition is moved over to this purchase order, and it's here waiting. I can add more information about it. I can choose shipping, how I want this shipped. Maybe I have another attachment I want to add. I can do this at this time. And we can go ahead and create this purchase order. I'm going to go ahead and post this. And it takes me to my list of purchase orders. This is, again, purchase order now number 58. It was PR, purchase requisition 58. Now it's PO 58. It's for that same amount. And let's say a few days have gone by. This is shown up in our receiving. And at this point, I could choose a receiver for physical goods. If it was non-physical goods, I could simply choose to create a vendor invoice straight from the PO. I'm going to choose receiver. And we see that this has come in. And we have our receivers double check that this quantity is received. They may attach something. Maybe they attach a PDF of the vendor invoice that the vendor has sent with this at this time. Or maybe it's the shipping statement that has come in. They can attach to the document. Maybe they have a vendor document number at this point, and they can go ahead and post that document number here. So we can track that with this receiver. I'm going to go ahead and post this receiver. So now we know within the accounting system that we have this request. We created a purchase order. We sent it to the vendor. The vendor has sent us the information. And now I have this posted receiver from medical supply company, and I can go ahead and convert that to the only thing that's left, which is vendor invoice. I'm going to click vendor invoice, and now I'm going to create a vendor invoice. This is where we hit the GL. And again, everything is brought over as needed. The terms are set here. That's important that I know those. Again, I can create another attachment if I need to. I can see that everything's as it was. I can go back and double check any paperwork around this. And I go ahead and post this invoice. And as I post this invoice, it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to hit the general ledger. It's going to hit accounts payable. It's going to hit my accounts payable journal. And now in accounts payable, if I go to bills, I have this new bill right here for $43.50. And there's that bill number from the vendor that's following this item. And I can go ahead and pay this invoice from here in accounts payable. I can also see this in my vendor invoices, and I can process this from here as well. I can go back to any of these if I want to look these up. If a vendor calls me and says I need something, I need to check on an invoice, I can go back and view an old invoice, and I have all the information about what was done, if when the transaction came in. I also have a history. I can see all the documents that were created to get to that vendor invoice. And I can see any payment details. I can see that there was a check cut for this invoice for $100, and I can give that information. I even have the document number to give that to the vendor when they call. And so I have all this information and all this automation and everything stored. So I'm not running around the office, pulling out files, looking for things, opening different QuickBooks files maybe to track down these things. They're all in one place. I can even get to this information from the vendor themselves, the vendor record. I can pull up the vendor record and see their past transactions. What we've done is we've really automated the process. We can also automate approvals in the same way with time and expenses. The way we've created these is with approval rules. Let me go ahead and show you that as we go into setup. I have approval policies. I'm going to go ahead and click the list of approval policies. I only have one defined for my purchasing requisition in this company. That's the rule we used. And if we go to the edit for that rule, we give it a name, and then we set some rules. So we can set multiple rules. I've set a value approval rule, and if I want to go look at what that is, it says that it needs a level 1 approver. So there's different levels we give to people within the company, to users. We give them different levels of approval. I need a level 1 approver for anything between $500 and $1,000. Level 2 for $1,000 to $2,500, and over $2,500 I need a level 3 approval. And so that's a really simple approval. I could set this to mean to require multiple approvers. I could set it to department approvals. I have a lot of different ways I could set the approvals. I've created a value approval, but as you can see, I've got department approvals, transaction department approvals, individual approvals. So I could set an approval rule for something just to an individual. Maybe there's certain things at certain levels that I only want my CFO to approve, and I can set that rule. And so you have the ability to set those up. Again, no scripting. It's all done within the finance department. And you can set these policies to really create automation around your purchasing and payment processes. As I mentioned, under accounts payable with bills, you can go ahead and select bills to pay. And as you select these bills to pay, you can create different options of how you want to pay them: by check, charge card, cash, ACH. And there's another way, and because we set this up live, I don't have it in this demo, and that's with paying with checks, ACH, or American Express corporate card, all through American Express. So rather than printing your own checks, you could send the payment information off to American Express. They would cut and mail the check for you. And as we look at cost savings, there's huge cost savings in having those checks outsourced. And because we're going through American Express, it's getting done properly. And it charges against your own bank account. So it's not getting charged to American Express account, it's your own bank account. You can also use your American Express corporate card, which you can just load into the system. American Express sends the vendor a one-time use number, so there's more security around the card. You're not updating card numbers with vendors. They can only use it for the transaction that it's specified for, and it reports back to the general ledger when they've run the payment. And so you have instant reporting. You also get all the benefits when you use the American Express card to pay your bills. You get the float, meaning from the time the bill is paid until you have to pay American Express, you have a little bit of a cushion there. You also have the ability to receive any benefits, any points benefits. We have companies that have actually monetized their AP system and actually making more back than they're paying for their financial system. Essentially, their system's paying for itself. And with that ends the automation portion of this demonstration. And we'll move back over to our presentation as we move off to integration. We really do want to be our customers' partner for the life of their business. Part of that is being able to grow with them by integrating with solutions that change as their needs change. As you grow, you're going to find that other partners are a best fit for other aspects of your organization, like CRM, payroll, and planning. As a best-in-class solution, Sage Intacct integrates nicely with dozens of these solutions. You have the flexibility to choose integrated solutions that make the most sense for your business. You can also swap out those systems as you grow and change. So for the integration portion, rather than showing you a demonstration within this system or within this company, I'm going to go ahead and jump out to a new tab right here to start with, and I'm going to jump over to the Intacct corporate website. And what I want to point out is that we have a lot of companies. As we go over here to partners, we have the Sage Intacct Marketplace. And in the Sage Intacct Marketplace, we have partners that have created systems that complement or can work with your financial system. For instance, we have things like ADP. We actually have a built-in integration there. American Express corporate card payment services. We also have ACH and check payment services with American Express. Those two happen to be built in. You can choose different expense reporting, or maybe you need to improve your closing for a faster close and you have some complexities there that you need more automation around. Flowcast helps you close the books on a regular basis at the end of period. Workforce Go, Adaptive Insights. You're dealing with sales tax, Avalara. That's actually a built-in one as well. You can simply turn on. But we have these integrations. All these partners have created integrations to go with Sage Intacct. They allow you to go in and have back and forth communication between their solution and Sage Intacct so that you're not retyping information. So you're not entering errors as you move information. So rather than having things happen in Salesforce, in your CRM, so if we click CRM here, we'll see that we have a few CRMs to choose from. So rather than entering opportunities in Salesforce, and as you close those, having to re-enter the information in Sage Intacct, you can create an integration. And so as you close an opportunity, you can automatically generate a sales order over in Sales Intacct, or a project, or if you're in subscriptions, a contract. And so we have all these different, CRM opportunities. Perhaps you have some software that isn't on this list, something specific to healthcare that you're looking at for managing patients on your front office, and you need to connect it to your financials. We have an open API, meaning you can go ahead and develop an integration between your system and Sage Intacct to report, to send information back and forth with Sage Intacct. If we go back into Sage Intacct and we go to company subscriptions, some of these are built in. Advanced CRM with Salesforce is built in. Avalara Tax is built in, meaning that these are much easier to configure. The configuration already exists on our side. With the ones that aren't built in, with marketplace partners that aren't built in, that marketplace partner knows how to configure things, and they'll assist you in configuring that. You see Open Air, and then we've got vendor payment services, Wells Fargo Payment Manager, and Zoara integration. So you have the ability through an open API, and we have a developer site that has all the documentation to use that API to go ahead and create your own integrations, or to use the marketplace partners. We have dozens of marketplace partner applications ready and waiting for you to use to extend the system. So what we're following really is a best in class, meaning that we believe that we can be really good at being the best in financials. And so we create what we consider a best-in-class system for your financials, and allow other companies like Salesforce and Exactly and these companies to create best-in-class systems in other areas, and then we integrate those with an open API. I didn't see any questions come in on that, so we'll go ahead and end this portion of the demonstration and move back to the summary of our presentation. So why choose Sage Intacct? Well, we're the right partner to help you in your success. As a leader in innovation, we're recognized as a visionary by industry analysts like Gartner. We're the cloud accounting leader in customer satisfaction with a rating of 98 out of 100 on G2 Crowd across over 2,000 reviews. We're the first and only preferred financial solution of the AICPA. And we're the preferred choice of the IFAC. Thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you saw some things that align with where your finance team is going. We would love to hear from you, and even do a demo of how Sage Intacct can meet your specific needs. If you want to learn more about Sage Intacct, you can try our 30-day trial, attend additional webinars, follow us on Twitter or connect with us on Facebook, or contact us directly. Thank you and have a wonderful day.